This is draft season presented by Moody's, a proud partner of the Giants. Decode Russ, unlock opportunity. Learn more at Moody's.com. John Schmeelk, Tony Pauline from Sportskeeda. Another episode of draft season. Our guest this week, we're joined by friend of the program, Trevor Sikkema, who by my count does about 2,000 podcasts a week for Pro Football Focus. I don't know how you keep track of the pro and college stuff, man, but it's good to talk to you.
2001 here with
There
this
you go.
show being number 2001. But no, it's always good to be with you guys. I appreciate you having me on. I will say that doing as many shows as I do definitely forces me to keep up with college and pro probably more than I ever have. So it's been fun though to have that full scope, especially knowing that you got an eye towards the NFL draft as well.
Absolutely. So, Trev, let's start here. Big games last week, none bigger than Ohio State and Michigan. And, we all joked last year that all these Ohio State kids that could have went day two, maybe even late day one for some of them, all went back to school just to beat Michigan. Didn't happen in a very ugly, ugly game. And I'm not going to say the bloom is off the rose for some of these Ohio State players, but I don't really think any of them have improved their stock going back to school this year.
No, I would agree with you. I don't know if they're worse per se, but it's not like, well, I mean it's been a tough year, I'll say, for Denzel Burke, the cornerback from Ohio State. I know had first round aspirations, and he really just has not put out first round tape, in my opinion. There are a couple of players who I do think are on the up. Lathan Ransom, their safety, I think is having his best year of his career. So him coming back, and even though it's a stronger safety class, I think that he is playing well. JT Tuimoloau, he didn't take that massive leap that we thought that he was going to at some point throughout his college football career, but he now has multiple years of tape out there where he's just a really solid football player. So maybe didn't make that jump into the first round, but I think you at least feel better about the floor. You just know what you're kind of getting with a player like him. Tyleik Williams, the interior defensive lineman, really good year run stopping, but he as well, it's like, okay, well, you kind of come back. We want to see a little bit more from you as a pass rusher. We still need to continue to see that from him moving forward. Along the offensive line, it's a shame that the two guys who I think really improved their stock in this team, if you want me to be honest, are Seth McLaughlin, the interior offensive lineman, who I saw flashes of while he was at Alabama. I know the consistency wasn't quite there, but there were a couple of reps where, I really enjoyed his play when I was watching his tape at Alabama, because he could have went out in last year's class, transfers to Ohio State, plays well this year, and then obviously suffers the Achilles injury in practice, which really sucks. And then on the other side of things, their left tackle, Josh Simmons, he was my OT5 going into this season, because it wasn't quite all there yet for him, but the athletic potential, how he moved even last year, was really nice. And I thought he was really starting to put it together this year before suffering a knee injury against Oregon and ending his season early. So unfortunately, it feels like the guys that have improved their stock the most are those two offensive linemen who we don't get to see anymore, even in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and Tony, it was reported this morning, Adam Schefter had it, that Simmons will be heading into the NFL draft. His agent said that, he'll be ready to go for training camp. Well, we were the same thing about Jonathan Brooks last year at this time, right? And then I think week 10, it took until he got on the field for the Panthers. So we'll see how that goes with the injury. Your thoughts, Tony, on this game, and you can attack the Michigan side of things if you want.
Well, I mean, Michigan stepped up. I don't necessarily agree. I think that Tuimaola and Sawyer took a step back. We were expecting big things from them. I think Tuimaola at this point last year was maybe a fringe late first round pick. He's not getting into the top 32. I'd be shocked if he gets into the top 32. Conversely to that, I mean, you look at the game that Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant played, both guys who I'm told are going to enter the draft. And I mean, they were unstoppable. Granted, they were playing against a readjusted Ohio State offensive line. Their best guard is now out at left tackle. They got a second string of center in, as Trevor was talking about. But those guys, they couldn't be stopped. I think that Ohio State didn't help the situation by consistently running the ball between tackles rather than coming up with something creative. But Mason Graham showed why he's going to be an early pick. And I believe Kenneth Grant also showed why he's going to be a first-round pick. I think Kalel Mullings, the running back, who was a third-string running back last year, has really taken the ball and run with it this year, per se. Had an outstanding game. I mean, that play where he worked it. He kept his balance. He kept on his feet late in the fourth quarter, broke the tackle. I believe it was like a 20-plus yard run. That iced the game for Michigan. And he is a guy who's very, very underrated. A bigger guy, more of a downhill ball carrier, but has got some speed. He's got some decent quickness. And I know that no one likes or talks about fullbacks anymore, but you got to love Max Bredesen. I mean, he is a throwback lead blocker. They use him behind the quarterback. They line him up as an H-back. I mean, he does the dirty work. He's the type of guy. He's only a junior. When he enters the draft, he's going to be a seventh round pick, Bredesen, but he's going to go on to have a 10 to 12-year career in the NFL.
You know, Trev, it's funny. This is going to be a boring draft, I think, for people that aren't locked in on it like we are. But a guy like, Mason Graham, you watch him, I don't know if he has superstar potential, but he is as safe of a pick as you can get. And I really feel like, and I'll kind of get into this more with you when we get into the big board, guys like Grant, guys like Graham, teams are going to prioritize, I think, even if it's not a premium position, safer players in this draft, because I just don't think we're seeing a lot of guys with a ton of upside. But a guy like Graham, you pick him in the top 10, you know exactly what you're getting.
He's awesome. He really is. I mean, you do know exactly what you get, and I think you get a floor with Mason Graham when it comes to what he is as a run defender, how much effort he will give you all the way to the whistle, but it's more than that. I mean, you say like, okay, I don't know if he has superstar potential. In this class, I'd draft him as such. Like, I would take this dude in the top 5. I really do.
So would I. I agree with you on that.
I think he's one of the best players in the class. And the thing is, really the only thing kind of going against Mason Graham, not that he's a perfect player, but it's the arm length, right? I think people are going to look at the arm length, and you could see it on tape, some of that lack of length there from him. On the interior of the defensive line, it's not the worst thing in the world. We see interior defensive linemen with shorter arms have success at the NFL level, but anytime you're sort of behind the 8 ball when it comes to those NFL measurables and just percentiles that you want to hit, it gives you a little bit of hesitation. When he gets to the combine, I think he's going to have those shorter arms. And I think that's going to be a discussion point with him. But just turn on the tape, man. I mean, just like extremely fast and violent hands, very strong grip strength. I mean, the way that he plays with leverage and holds the line of scrimmage against double teams, how he can push, pull, and rip guys off of him. He's, to me, he is a phenomenal pass rusher, even without that length that a lot of other defensive linemen at the NFL might have. So I think he's a great run defender, which gives him that high floor. But I also think he's got a lot of pass rush potential, even for the pro level as well. So Mason Graham is somebody that I'd feel very comfortable with taking in the top 5 of this upcoming draft.
Tony, you wanted to touch on the Georgia Tech game.
Well, I mean, again, we see, Georgia is sort of Ohio State, a lesser version of Ohio State. They come into games, they don't seem prepared, they're playing from behind, but unlike Ohio State, they end up winning. They find a way to win where Ohio State has not. I mean, if you watch that game, you look at Carson Beck, he continues his fall. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't. Haynes King of Georgia Tech was the better quarterback in that game compared to Carson Beck, who a lot of people not too long ago were talking about as a top 15 selection. So, again, it seems like Carson Beck can't get out of his own way at times. Didn't have many bad plays, didn't have any bad interceptions, but could not move the Georgia offense, which is disturbing against the Georgia Tech defense, which is sort of like Michigan. I mean, they're the little train that could. They don't have superstar talent, unlike Michigan, but they get the job done. I thought that was an interesting dynamic in that game. Jackson Hawes, a tight end that we're going to see at the Senior Bowl. He's big, he's athletic, he's developing, solid pass catcher, also a real good blocker. They use him on the line of scrimmage. They put him in motion on the second level. If you watch that game, Jackson Hawes was one of the reasons why Georgia Tech was able to move the ball down the field, because he did such a good job as a blocker.
Yeah, Hawes reminds me. Go ahead, Trev. I was just going to say, Hawes reminds me a little bit right now of sort of what we thought about Tip Ryman last year from Illinois. He was sort of that same mold of just this bigger. He's got a little bit of athleticism to him, but the reason why you're going to draft him is as a blocker. Now, him going in the 3rd round was kind of a shock to me. I was surprised that the Cardinals drafted him as high as they did, but I think that for Hawes, that's sort of what you want. Like that's the ideal pathway. And I think that his agents are probably going to be pumping up, that Tip Ryman selection and the things that he's been able to do in his rookie season with the Cardinals, because his scouting report's going to read pretty similarly.
Trev, what has you excited about conference championship weekend coming up here? What do you have your eyes on?
I mean, look, it's going to be great with the SEC championship game. I mean, because really we're going to see 2 fantastic rosters. It's quarterbacks that I agree, like, didn't really take that next step that we wanted them to, for Carson Beck and for Quinn Ewers, but there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. I'm excited to see Georgia's defensive line, and especially a guy like Jalen Walker, who's sort of that hybrid off-ball linebacker, edge rusher type of a player. Him getting to go up against guys like Cameron Williams and Kelvin Banks Jr. on Texas' side of things is going to be round 2 of that. Getting to see Ja'Day A.J. Barron, who has, I believe he's still tied for the interception lead in the SEC. First, he started at safety. Then he was a slot corner. Now he's an outside corner throughout his career at Texas. And so there's just so much NFL talent on both sides of the ball, even independent of those quarterbacks. So I'm looking at the SEC this week, and I'm really excited about that. I'm also excited to see what Ashton Genty's going to do this week, right? Because he's close, right? He's close to some of those crazy records. And is Boise State just going to say, we are going to feed this man the football no matter what? It's so funny. I was watching it, and the debates between him and Travis Hunter for Heisman Trophy and all of that. And we don't have to get into that. But every week, I would make sure if I didn't get to see these games live, I'd at least look up some of the statistics in the PFF grades about how these guys did. And it's funny, there was one week that I had a realization of just how good Ashton Genty is. And I cannot remember the exact opponent, but I looked up his stats after the game because I wasn't able to catch the game. And I go, oh, he only had 22 carries for $195. Only? Like to say, only $195 in this game just goes to show you how dominant that guy's been.
How about you, Tony? What are you watching this weekend?
Yeah, I want to see, because that Ashton Genty as well, because that UNLV team and the defense is feisty. Yeah, they don't have great talent, but I mean they come to play and they are prepared. Ashton Genty always finds a way to get it done. I think Oregon versus Penn State is an interesting game. Drew Allar, sort of like a Carson Beck, sometimes, very streaky, doesn't have a lot of bad turnovers. How does he do against that Oregon defense, which is really solid from the front line through the secondary? A lot of good players. Allar's got to get that Penn State offense off hot to stay in that game, to have a chance to win that game. I think Allar, who I'm told is going to enter the draft, I don't think there's a questionable decision, but that's the way I'm told he's leaning. This is a big game for Allar against a very tough Oregon team.
Yeah, and in that Penn State game as well, Abdul Carter, who's had a great year as a full-time edge rusher for the first time this year, he's going up against Josh Connerly Jr. And Ajani Cornelius, the two offensive tackles for Oregon. And I know there are a lot of people who really like what Connerly Jr. could be at the pro level, and you'll see some people who go, oh man, he could be a top 50 pick. And there's some people who are kind of looking at him more as sort of what he is right now and saying, he's got a little bit of ways to go. So how he fares against Abdul Carter could actually mean a lot. I know it's one game, but sometimes NFL scouts, NFL GMs, when you play great against an elite opponent, sometimes that's the thing that can really push you into the top 50 because they believe in what you can be. So that's going to be a big matchup too.
Moody's is a proud partner of the New York Giants, uniting the brightest minds to turn today's risk into tomorrow's opportunities. Learn more at Moody's.com. Well, Tony, that was a great segue by Trevor there, because you wanted to talk to him about the offensive tackles, including Josh Connerly on PFF's big board. So, Tony, why don't you lead us off here?
Yeah, well, we looked at your big board. You got 6 offensive tackles in the top 25, which kind of goes against the grain. A lot of people have a lot of questions, including myself, about this tackle class. How do you rate the tackles based on the film now, or what you see now and their projection?
So I would say that it is more of what I see now generally with a lot of these players, because I do think that sometimes we get a little too caught up. And I have had this before, certainly as a scout in former draft classes, where I get a little bit too caught up with, but look at what he could be. Look at what he could be. And sometimes you really you need to see it from these players. And so even though there are players on my big board, even at the very top with the offensive line class, Will Campbell, maybe he's a guard instead of a tackle. I would try him at guard, or I would try him at tackle before I kick him inside to guard. I wouldn't quite go the Peter Skoronski, you're playing him at guard right away strategy. I'd go more towards the, J.C. Latham or Talize Fuanga, where you're giving these guys a chance to offensive tackle before maybe you kick him into guard. But Will Campbell could very well be a guard. Maybe even Kelvin Banks is the guard. We've seen that with Milam as well. So there's a lot of different offensive tackles that, even if you're kicking them inside, with this class in particular, I still like who they are as players. So a little bit of a debate there, but I do like a lot of the offensive linemen, I'll just say overall, when it comes to them versus the rest of the guys that would be in the 2025 class.
No, you're either reading my mind, or John has fed you.
I fed him nothing, Tony. I fed him nothing.
because my first 2 guys I was going to talk about was Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks, guards or tackles. I agree with you about Will Campbell. People talking about him at guard, I disagree. Put him at tackle until he proves he can't play tackle. Then you kick him inside the guard. Kelvin Banks does kind of concern me, because I'm told, he may not even be 6'4". He's probably going to be 6'3" and change when he measures. Now, I mean, do you have a problem with a guy that's 6'3.5" playing left tackle in the NFL, assuming he has 34-inch arms?
Right. And I think the arm length is going to be a big deal, but I also will factor in just his overall athleticism, right? And I think that means a lot too, especially when it comes to defending the outside shoulder. If you have the mobility, the flexibility, the explosiveness to really get out of your stance, sometimes you can mitigate being a little bit shorter of a player. And a lot of times with height, obviously you want your offensive tackle to kind of be as big as possible, right? I mean, like you want him to be a mountain. They got to move well, of course, but you want him to be a big guy. But the height part of an offensive tackle, when we talk about thresholds, really you're talking about arm length. You want the arm length to sort of match the higher height. So when you see an offensive tackle and he lines up and you go, okay, he's 6'6", 6'7", it's not really the height part of it. It's more of the length part of it. So as long as the arm length checks out, which I think he's got decently long arms for a player who I agree probably going to show up a shade under 6'4", he's then got the foot speed, the balance, and the athleticism to kind of mitigate that and make up for it as well. So the arm length is going to be big for me because if he's got shorter arms, now we're talking about a player who, man, okay, he really is built much more like a guard. He might have some extra quickness to him, but you might just have a really damn good guard who can move well, who can block under zone blocking concepts, be great as a puller out into space, things like that. He's still somebody who I haven't gotten to final evals for him yet. I still feel like he can survive at offensive tackle at the NFL level, but probably have a better answer once we get a couple of months down to get these final evals on these guys.
I'm going to jump around a little bit. Number 22 is his teammate, Cameron Williams. You talk about a mountain of a man,
Yeah.
but he shows a little bit of inflexibility. The mobility isn't there. He's a bit heavy-footed. Is that a concern to you, or do you see those things in him, I should say?
No, I do. And I see the struggles, and it's a great, question sort of coming off of asking, how do you judge these players? And Cam Williams is more one of those guys where I go, okay, 1-year starter, right, at the right tackle spot. And he is one of the younger players in this draft class if he were to declare, but there's so much there to like about him. It was like Amarius Mims, right? Amarius Mims, when he was coming out of last year's draft, if you just looked at the tape of Amarius Mims, there is some things that you would certainly worry about. The penalties, hand not being exactly where it is. And that's the same thing with Cam Williams. Cam Williams got a lot of penalties this year, whether it's holding or, he's just a step behind and he's got to grab a guy instead of being able to really shuffle and stay in front of him. So there's a lot of those issues with Cam Williams, but I do think a lot of his issues are fixable. Sometimes the feet do look a little heavy. And to your point, I think it's a really good point by you. That's one of the things that you look at and go, okay, that needs to get a little bit better. You do need to be a little bit lighter on your feet here, but it is something that you can mitigate a little bit. Some guys are able to do it better than others. Cam, though, again, in a class where it's not as rich, or I should say it's not as hyped or sure thing, if there is such a thing about that with NFL drafts, as maybe last year's class, Cam is one of those players where I go, yeah, I'd probably still take a flyer on him, especially in an offensive tackle class like we just said. There's a lot of guys who you go, all right, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? You don't have to worry about whether Cam Williams is a tackle or a guard. I mean, like that dude can play offensive tackle. He's got the body type. He's got the strength for it. The flashes are there. So that in and of itself is also, I think, a reason why you'd probably take him in the first round.
Go back to Marius Mims. One of the concerns about Marius Mims was I believe he played 8 games before he entered the draft.
Right.
Josh Simmons is ranked as your number 15 player. Now, coming into the season, I thought that Josh Simmons had first-round potential. I liked what I saw early in the game, early in the season before he went down with that knee injury. And that knee injury happened early. I believe the Oregon game was the 4th game of the season. Obviously, why do you have him ranked as the 15th overall player on the board?
Honestly, foot speed, mirror ability. That's what I like the most about him. Truly, it's that lower body athleticism with him. And the thing that I would watch with him last year is even when even when it wasn't quite perfect with him, you could tell that he was trying to process things at a very high level. Like you could tell even the reps where he might lose, where maybe he just overset a little bit, gave up the inside shoulder, something like that. You could tell in his head that he was thinking about all the things that he should be thinking about. The foot speed, the first step, exactly where it needed to be, hitting his landmarks, making sure his hands were up, winning with a certain punch, but then a defensive lineman maybe just hit him with a really good counter. And it's the way that I sort of watched him process things while the play was going on that I go, man, I like the size. I like the movement ability. And I think that you're approaching the game the right way. At that point in time, I go, if you give me more snaps, if you give me more reps, now I think we got something that, to agree with you, you got first round potential. And again, in a class where I think offensive linemen and defensive linemen are really going to own the first round of this draft, this is somebody who, if the knee at least checks out when we get to the combine and we're doing rechecks and everybody goes like, hey, yep, you know what? It's coming along well. Everything's going great. No complications, nothing like that. Even if he's not ready for week one, the week one thing, I agree with you. I think that's a little overblown. It's like, make sure the guy is good to go and ready to go, because I think just the way that he approaches pass blocking in particular is a really good skill set that we see with his tape already.
A lot of people like this player. I'm on the outside looking in. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Wyatt Millam of West Virginia, the tackle. What do you like about him? He's your 18th rated player.
I think that he is like Will Campbell, but I don't even want to say like a Will Campbell light, but it's sort of that same archetype where these are bigger players, but might lack a little bit of arm length. And I don't think his feet move quite as quick as Will Campbell's do. But I think the guy just knows how to play offensive line. I really do. He's got one of the highest pass blocking and run blocking grades that we've got in PFF so far this season. Damn near elite as a PFF pass blocker. Has not given up many pressures. I don't know if he's given up a single sack of this season. I can't remember off the top of my head. Haven't checked in a couple of weeks. But, I mean, he has been a stone wall there for them. And so, just again, the way that he approaches pass blocking to me is so advanced in what he is able to do. I think that if you want to kick him into guard, I think that he'd be a fantastic guard at the NFL level. And again, we talk about guys having higher floors. John mentioned our team's going to gravitate towards higher floors this year, as opposed to maybe taking the chances of flyers with players with maybe a little bit higher ceiling. To me, Milam is going to resonate with a lot of teams that might say, hey, it's not the best draft class in the world. Let me go get a guy that I know is going to be a starter for me. In my opinion, Wyatt Milam is that, because of how he processes things and how smart he is with how he's attacking those pass rushers, even with maybe a little bit of physical limitations to him.
A guy you mentioned earlier that we're going to disagree on, Josh Conerly of Oregon. I love Josh Conerly. I think he's got first round potential. I think he's top 50 pick, top 45 pick. You got him ranked as 114. I see a lot of Kelvin Banks and Josh Conerly. I see the mobility. I see the agility. I see the ability to slide out and pass protection, get out on the second level. I think he's going to be guard like Kelvin Banks. He's going to be his own blocking guard. What is it about Josh Conerly that you don't like that you have him outside your top 100?
So I did not love him coming into the season, because last year's tape I thought was really raw. Where I looked at Kelvin Banks and I said, okay, he's got some rawness to his film, but I think he was a little bit even further along. Certainly, I shouldn't even say a little bit. He was quite a bit more further along, in my opinion, and somebody who I felt better about his NFL projection than Conerly. He has been better as of late. I think he was off to a little bit of a slow start to this season, and sort of when we get back to offensive tackle reviews, I think he could certainly make a jump into my top 100, maybe even top 75. But I just had some concerns with him about how he was processing pass rushers coming at him. I felt like he would give up his inside shoulder a little bit too much. Sometimes I felt like he struggled with strength. Sometimes a little bit I feel like that with Kelvin Banks too. They're a little bit too finesse. And when you're a little bit too finesse as an offensive tackle, man, it gives me a little cause for concern, because it's a powerful player's game at the NFL level. We are seeing that there is a prerequisite for power at the NFL level. And going into this season, and even at the beginning of the season, I didn't feel like Conerly was playing with that power that I wanted to see him play with. So I think just looking at the grades and his performances over the last couple of weeks, it feels like he's playing better in that regard. But we'll get to his tape in the final reviews, but that's ultimately why he has been lower for me than others, is I've got a little bit of concerns that he might be a little bit too finesse for the NFL level.
All right, Trevor, I want to ask you about this class overall, and this is what I threw this to you earlier this week, so be ready for the question. If you take last year's class combined with this year's class, of the top 20 picks, how many of those guys would come from the 2025 draft class?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question, right? And it's one of the questions that it's sort of one of the first ones that we get asked every year, because people want to have a good idea of like, okay, you're talking to me about this guy being good, but how good? Like, compare it to last year's class. I think there are 6 or 7 players, I would say, that I would take from this year's class to last year's class. Travis Hunter is one of them.
Mhm.
Mason Graham is another. Ashton Genty is another. Abdul Carter. So that's 4 that I think we would get into the top 40. Then I think we're talking about Will Johnson and Tetairoa McMillan as the 6th. Tetairoa McMillan's probably the one that, the more I kind of watch of him, I like him a lot. Obviously, it was a star-studded wide receiver class last year, so maybe that sort of skews where I might have put him in the top 20. But I looked at my top 20 big board from last year, and then I compared it with this year, and I started to put these guys a little bit in the list. And so I would say 6 or 7 players from this year that I would get into the top 20 of last year.
And I think it's telling you did not mention a quarterback in your list of players, and that's where I want
Right.
to take you next. You have Jalen Milroe as your number 1 quarterback, and now you have Cam Ward closing quick. I think he's right next to him on the board, right? And then you have Shedeur Sanders a few spots back. When you look at this quarterback class, we had Dan Brugler on a couple weeks ago. He said he'd have this year's class in that Penix Knicks area, type of that range. I know you were a big Knicks guy last year. You must love watching the Broncos, as you must be patting yourself in the back all day long. But why Milroe ahead of those other 2 guys? And I know this is your big board. They're going to get picked higher than that. That's just the way they go. But what are your concerns with this class in general, and why do you have Milroe ahead of those other 2 guys right now?
Yeah, overall, I mean, if you were asking me like, hey, which quarterbacks go in the first round, as of right now, we're recording this obviously early December, I would tell you that Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are going to be the 2 quarterbacks that I think go in the first round. I don't know if we get any other quarterbacks in the first round. I like Milroe a lot. And I would say that I like Milroe's potential a lot. And in a quarterback class where I feel like I've got to bet on potential, because that's how you got to set up these conversations with these quarterbacks. None of them are, like you said, the guys from last year's class. Jaden, Caleb Williams, Drake May, none of them are those guys. They're in a lot of ways, they're not even Penix and Knicks, and how established those players were coming out of college to the NFL level. So if you know that none of these quarterbacks have that type of hype, well, then at that point, you got to sort of look at what they are and what they could be. Cam Ward, it's been fantastic this year with the big time throws, but the turnover worthy plays and just those crazy throws, those Jameis Winston or Will Levis type decisions from him, they have existed throughout his entire college football career, from Incarnate Word to Washington State to even now with Miami. Now, the good is outweighing the bad still with Cam Ward this season. I want to make that very clear. And he gives you that big game hunter mentality to play the quarterback position the way you need to win games in the NFL. But man, there is still that drawback for him of thinking that he can get away with passes that you just absolutely cannot at the NFL level. If he improves in that regard, okay, but that's still, when you look at, that's been his nature the whole time. It's tough to really get that out of somebody. Shedeur Sanders, and I'm just comparing these guys before I get to Milroe. Shedeur Sanders, I think he operates the pocket pretty well, but his pressure to sack ratio has been really high over the last couple of years. I think he handles pressure well. I think he's got a handful of big time throws. He understands how to play that quarterback position, especially in the biggest moments. But I don't think that Shedeur has the best arm. I really don't. I mean, my comp for Shedeur coming out is Teddy Bridgewater right now. And I love Teddy. Like, Teddy was great. When Teddy was coming out of Louisville, he was a nails thrower. I mean, when his back was against the wall, I mean, he could make the big time throw for you. He'd take the hit. He'd deliver the throw. And if that's sort of what you want from the quarterback position, obviously Shedeur gives you the ability to do that. But Teddy didn't have the best arm in the world. It was more of a step down, maybe a tier 3 arm for the NFL level. And I think that that's kind of where we're at with Shedeur Sanders. He might be a little bit limited when it comes to that overall arm talent. Milroe, I think, is the biggest project of the 3 quarterbacks that we're talking about here. He is the most inconsistent right now. But if I'm going to take a bet on a guy, Milroe is somebody who, one, he gives you the dual threat ability of where the game is going, getting more dual threat ability from the rush, from the quarterback position when it comes to utilizing their legs. I don't worry about his arm talent. I think the guy's got a cannon of an arm, when it comes to distance and velocity, which I think is very, very important. And I just think that this is a big part of it too. And this is the part of the puzzle that is often the most clouded when we sort of on this side of things go through the draft process. You don't really get to sit down with these guys and get to know them as much as you would. And for the quarterback position, it's paramount that you have to get to know who these players are. From getting coached by Nick Saban to the things that I have heard from Jalen Milroe this season, he seems like somebody who is just incredibly focused, incredibly team-centric. I mean, he does what he needs to do for the team to win, and he just seems like somebody who is going to strive to be the best version of themselves at all times. And that work ethic is so important for having a franchise caliber quarterback. And everything that I have heard and read and watched of Jalen Milroe when it comes to when the helmet comes off tells me that he is going to work to get to that point. So now I feel a little bit safer in saying, all right, well, I need him to get better, but I think he's got the mentality to want to get better as well. So it's a lot of those things. Milroe, I understand, is sort of the biggest wild card of all of this.
Now,
But if
Tony
I've
loves
got
him
to
too,
sort of,
Trev. It's not just you. Tony loves him some Jalen Milroe. He's on board with you.
but I'm saying, like, if I've got to bet on one of these guys, give me the guy who I don't have to worry about when it comes to arm talent, gives you the dual threat ability, and somebody who has been saying a lot of the right things over the last couple of years to give you that perseverance, that work ethic that you need to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL.
Well, let me ask you about Milroe because, as John told you, from our first show this season, I was all over him. I thought he had the ability to make a Jaden Daniels type of jump to the top of the draft. That's not going to happen. But watching him the past couple of weeks, does it concern you that he seems to be relying more on his running ability than his passing ability? I mean, his running numbers are great. His passing numbers are stagnant. And I agree with you. He's an incredible leader and everything you hear about him. But my concern is, on a Sunday afternoon, if the arm's not there, if he's not into a groove, he relies more on his running ability, which is nice. But when that is predominant, or that is your main avenue of gaining yardage as a quarterback, that could lead to disaster.
No, I do agree with you there. I mean, probably the working comp right now for him is Justin Fields, right? Where you have a floor of how good you are as a rushing threat as a quarterback. But there's no doubt about it. You have to be able to throw the ball in the NFL to be a successful quarterback. And you have to be able to get to that point. So it does worry me. And that's sort of why I have more reservations now with Jalen Milroe towards the end of the season than I did at the beginning. I mean, the Georgia game was incredible. I watched the Georgia game and even the Vanderbilt game after that. They lose that Vanderbilt game, but Milroe was fantastic. And it's those two games that you watch him put throw after throw together and you go, okay, well, again, if you give me the rushing ability this guy has and you give me this type of passing ability, now we're talking about a QB1 type of a guy. But over the last couple of weeks, the Oklahoma game, the last few games, you're right, where he's relied much more as a runner to be successful. It does worry me a little bit. Now I'm curious to see. It looks like they're going to make the college football playoff. So it looks like we're going to get at least one more game out of him. What does that look like in what is the biggest game of the year? And more importantly, I think this is a key part of it too. You talk about him being more of a rushing threat. I wonder if that's the game plan, right? I wonder if the coaches are saying, hey, maybe behind the scenes, maybe you don't say this to him outright, but you go like, hey, we need to run the ball more with Jalen than we need to throw the ball with him. And I think that could be a little bit of an indictment as well. What's the game plan look like with Jalen Milroe if they end up getting into the college football playoff and playing one of those games? Because if he's going to be QB1 in this class, in my opinion, he needs another game where he can show you what he can do with his arm. And if he doesn't get that in whatever this next college football playoff opportunity is, I don't know if he's going to have enough steam to go to be the first quarterback off the board.
Final one for me, Trev, and then Tony has a bunch of individuals he wants to get to really fast. Last one for me. We talked about kind of maybe looking for higher floor rather than higher ceiling. I think this might also be all right, maybe we will take a safety in the top 10. All right, maybe we will take a running back in the top 10. Last year's class was littered with premium players at premium positions, right? Whether it was wide receiver, quarterback, offensive tackle. You don't see that this year. So I do wonder if teams are just going to say, you know what, I'm going to get a good player. Even if it's not a premium spot, at least I know this guy is going to be very good.
Yeah, no, I think that could absolutely be the case. And you got two great examples in Ashton Jeanty, which we've already talked about, and Malachi Starks from Georgia as safeties. And you often see those guys and you go, okay, well, safeties, running backs, you can kind of get them whenever. You don't need to draft them in the first round. I think that both of those guys are going to be first round picks when it's all said and done, because of not only how talented they are, but you're right, it's not exactly littered with all sorts of premium positions. I'll tell you this too. I mean, we might get two tight ends in the first round. We might get Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren. They might make it in the first round. And then
defensive tackles too. That's an unsexy position, but there's going to be a lot of DTs picked.
A lot of DTs picked. I mean, Mason Graham, you talked about Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan, whether you view him as more of an odd front defensive end or you view him as a true interior defensive tackle for an even front, like he's somebody who's on the rise as well. Derek Harmon from Oregon, who I'm a little bit lower on, but is certainly having a phenomenal year. He can get himself very high into the top 50. There's no doubt about that with how we hear conversations. But even beyond, round one with the tight end class, I think it's a great year to need a tight end. And a lot of people just sort of think about that position as an afterthought. But Gunnar Helm, Eli Stowers, Mason Taylor, Harold Fannin. Like there's a lot of tight ends to really like in this class. So it feels like a pretty good year to need like a running back. It's a very deep running back class beyond Genty, but tight end as well. Maybe a lot of those quote unquote unsexy positions. You can get those throughout rounds 2 and 3.
All right,
Yeah, I
Tony, it's
agree
all
with you.
yours.
I agree with you on Harmon. I mean, some people talking about him as a top 15 pick. He's nice, but I just don't see it. Go through a couple of individual players for you. Emeka Ibuke, the wide receiver from Ohio State. He is your number 16 player. I just don't see it. I thought maybe last year, going through the year, he could be a potential first round pick. Was second fiddle to Marvin Harrison last year. Was second fiddle to Jeremiah Smith this year. Loses out to Carnell Tate. I think he's a nice complementary receiver in Ibuke. What does he show, or what does he have that gives him that 15th ranking for you?
There's too many times I watch Ibuka where I can't help but think of either DJ Moore or Amon-Ra St. Brown. There's just too many times that I watch him where I think of those two receivers for me to have them too much lower. And, DJ Moore obviously is somebody who was drafted a lot higher, but, Amon-Ra St. Brown, somebody who was drafted a lot lower, who has certainly become one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And Ibuka is somebody who, to sort of your point, your evaluation, not to discredit it at all, like, he doesn't quite blow you away in really any category, but I feel like he is somebody who understands how to win at the position so well. And if he continues to have that sort of work ethic, because let's be very clear, Amon-Ra St. Brown is very talented, but just like Puka Nacua, the reason why he is as productive as he is because he wants it more than anybody else. It feels like he has worked so hard to get every single ounce out of his talent that he has had in the NFL. And we're obviously seeing an unbelievably productive player. If Ibuka sort of has that sort of mentality, in my opinion, he does so many things well. He's got the quick feet. He's got the good route running savviness. He knows how to sit in zone. He's got reliable hands, and he's a little bit bigger than Amon-Ra St. Brown is as well. Is he the twitchiest guy? Is he the fastest guy? Is he the biggest guy? No, but I do think he has really well-rounded games. Sometimes that can end up in a very productive player like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sometimes it can make you adjust a guy, as they will say in the scouting world. But I think Ibuka very clearly, with him being in my top 20, is more towards that Amon-Ra St. Brown type of archetype.
You got Shannon Ravel, the cornerback from East Carolina, at number 35. The guy's got incredible size, speed numbers. I thought he showed a lot of development in his game and progress in his ball skills early on before he went down with that knee injury in practice. Is the 35th ranking based on the fact that he only played a short amount of games this season? I agree with it. But, it's sort of like Josh Simmons. I think if Ravel had a full season behind him and kept progressing, we're talking about him as a top 20 player in this draft.
It's hard for corner, right? One, he's coming off an ACL injury, and ACL obviously means a lot for a position that demands athleticism. And he's incredibly athletic. I watched him over the summer, and I was like, okay, all right, we got something here. I mean, this dude has the size. He's got the fluidity. Yep. He's twitched up. He's got that overall athleticism. I mean, when you watch him, though, it's not like his game is totally perfect right now. I still think he at times is reacting instead of anticipating, and he's relying on that athleticism, that size to sort of make up for it. Like Tariq Woolen is a player like that at the NFL level. Well, Tariq Woolen will give you some incredible plays because of how big and how fast and how athletic he is. But there are other times where we've seen even this season, some games where Tariq Woolen's really struggling because he's failing to anticipate, and instead he's just reacting and saying, well, I'm big and fast enough to be able to react to this guy and make a play on the ball at the NFL level. That's not always a guarantee. I like how Ravel started this season. There's no doubt about it. But it's hard for me to look at how he played in his first couple of games and say, okay, if we just project out a full season of that, because as you guys both know, corner is so up and down naturally. I mean, look at Sauce Gardner, right? Was the best corner in football, it felt like, for 2 straight years. And now this year, fully healthy, nothing wrong with him, just a down year. It's just hard to play the position that consistently. And for Siobhan Ravel, he gives you a lot of what you would want. But I still think that anticipation part of his game is something that needs to improve. And I just haven't seen it consistently from him being that dominant player with all of that athleticism. So that's why I think he certainly, if you told me, hey, I'm going to take a bet on him in the first round, I'd go, okay, totally, I get it. But that's why he stacks up more as that early second, late first round fringe type of a player where I've also seen him much higher on big boards from other people that I respect.
Ashton Gillette, the defensive lineman from Louisville, you have number 45. I thought top 45 coming into the season was an absolute possibility for him, but he's fallen off the face of the earth, it seems. I mean, his production has, it is a fraction of what it was a year ago. What is it this year, especially compared to last year, that keeps, in your mind, keeps him as the 45th best player in the draft?
Going back to what we were talking about with offensive tackle play, when you play in the trenches, power is a prerequisite. And Jelani, nobody plays with more power, it feels like, consistently than this dude. I mean, his legs, his butt are tree trunks. He has got this low leverage. He knows how to keep his pad level low. And when he fires off the line of scrimmage, something that I noted with his scouting report when we were doing summer scouting is, I'm like, okay, I love that you play physical. Sometimes you're more focused on hitting the offensive lineman than you are getting to the quarterback as quickly as possible. But it's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, I still like that about you, that you're able to do something like that. But the bull rush, the stack and shed ability, I mean, just the power, the speed to power that this guy has. He's not Jared Verse, but we're seeing right now, like when you have a powerful profile to you at that type of a level, we're seeing what a Jared Verse could be in the NFL. And again, I'm not saying that Gelati is the exact same as Jared Verse, but it is sort of, he approaches the game the same way that Verse does, in that I just want to run straight through your chest at all times. He's never afraid to be physical. And so, yeah, the production is down a little bit, but I've still got faith in who the player is and how much power he plays with.
Go back to Ohio State. Why Jack Sawyer over JT Tuimoloau?
Over the last couple of years, he's just been a lot more productive in our system. Like, he's just been a much higher passer win percentage player. He's been a better run defender. He's got more solo stops. He's somebody who I just think has a little bit better hand usage. Although I will say, I feel like Tuimoloau has had a little bit better hand usage. He's been able to stay clean a little bit more this year. And so Tuimoloau, I agree with you. I don't think that he's going to be a first-round pick. He's solidified himself somewhere within day two. But Jack Sawyer, to me, is somebody who I still think he's got that shot to be a first-round pick because of how well he has graded on a play-by-play basis throughout this season. 6'5", 265 pounds. I mean, he's got the NFL size to play as that 4-3 defensive end. He's not the twitchiest dude. He's not the bendiest dude, but he's very scheme versatile in what you would want him to do. Some teams are going to love that. Some teams are going to want more of a streamlined sort of position for him. But to me, just that versatility and that floor of how well he has played over the last 2 years, almost an elite overall grade in our system over these last 2 years because of how consistent he has been. That's why I've got Sawyer over Tuimoloau.
Talk about two small school offensive linemen that are in your top 100. Gray Zabel of North Dakota State, the tackle, and Charles Grant of William and Mary, the offensive tackle. College offensive tackles. Are they going to be offensive tackles on Sunday, or are they going to be guards?
Probably not. I think that Zabel's, to me, is going to follow the Graham Barton path. And I don't know if that means specifically at center, but when I watch him, it's so hard to not see Graham Barton because they play the game the same way. And the first couple of things that you would write down for the strengths of their scouting report is vice grips, forehands. When Zabel gets his hands on you up and inside, which he often does, he ain't letting go. I mean, he's got a great core strength to him as well. He comes from, and I know that teams are going to love this. He won 3 straight championships when he was in high school, goes to an incredibly successful program at North Dakota State and is able to develop into a starting offensive lineman there. Winner in high school, successful in high school, winner in college, successful in college. So the NFL is going to love that part of him, that he just knows how to win at the trench spot. You mentioned he plays left tackle right now. I don't think he's going to be an offensive tackle at the NFL level. I think he's going to be a guard, perhaps a center, but I think the same with Charles Grant from William and Mary as well. He is very clearly, you turn on his tape, basically any game you watch, you go, okay, that's an NFL player playing against the guys that probably aren't going to make it at the pro level. And it's just very easy to see that. He's got the ideal build. He's got that ideal, I think, movement skills at the offensive tackle position for where he is playing right now. But I think those movement skills also translate inside. I didn't think about this, but I've heard people talk about him at center, and he's going to the Senior Bowl. We're going to get to see him at the Senior Bowl. And like we've seen with, like guys like Cody Mock and Graham Barton and like players like that, like they will play these guys at a bunch of different positions. And I think that Grant is going to be one of those guys that you want to key on because where are they putting him? And I think he's going to be able to get a chance to play center. And I'm really curious as to what he's going to be like at center, because as a puller, as a zone blocker, like I think he moves super well. And if he was in the middle of that offensive line and he's good with snapping the football, I think that again, just those movement skills are very enticing to me with him as an interior player, perhaps even in center.
Yeah, the lack of size is an issue for Grant. I'll tell everybody, if you can, go back and watch that North Dakota State Colorado game because Zabel was outstanding in that game. I mean, he really stepped up. Final guy for me, somebody I really like a lot. Talked about him over the summer. No one was paying attention to him. Transferred from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt. Eli Stowers. I mean, a real athletic, move sort of tight end who catches the ball well. It's under the radar guy. He is going to Shrine Game. I'm glad to see you had him in your top 80. Is he a blocker? Is he a move tight end? Is he a guy you're going to line up in the slot? You're going to put in motion? Can you do all those things with him? But what do you think about Stowers?
I think he could be really flexible with him, but where he's going to, butter his bread, if you will, is going to be as a receiver and as an athlete. His story is funny. You mentioned that he comes over from New Mexico State. So did Diego Pavia, the quarterback who is at Vanderbilt. And when both of those guys were at New Mexico State, Eli Stowers was actually a quarterback at first, and Diego Pavia beat him out for the quarterback job. And it was then at that point that Stowers was like, okay, well, I want to get on the football field. They try him out at tight end, and he plays very well at tight end while he was there. Both of those guys transfer over to Vanderbilt, and very clearly the chemistry is there. And even in some of Pavia's biggest games in the early parts of this season, he continually praised Stowers and said, dude, that is an NFL player. Like, that is the dude who helps me make the offense go. And I agree with him. As when it comes to yards after catch and matching up against safeties and linebackers, like, normally he's just too quick, he's too athletic, he's got great hands. And when you can play the quarterback position, normally you're coming from a high school background where you're the best athlete on the field and they probably just want to get you the ball in your hands as much as possible. That was probably still the case when he was at New Mexico State. He just loses the job out to Diego Pavia, and then they go, dude, you're so athletic, we got to get you on the field. Let's put you at tight end. And we talk about that with quarterbacks sometimes, but this to me is an actual success story. This is somebody who has embraced what it's like to play tight end. And he's only been playing full-time tight end for a couple of years. So you think he gets into the NFL, really starts to get his feet solidified and cemented into the position. I think he could be a really nice receiving tight end for some team at the NFL level.
And
you're
don't forget,
awesome
the main cog at those guys transferring to Vanderbilt was Jerry Kill, the coach. He was an outstanding story in itself.
Yep.
Trev, you're awesome at this. You're a gentleman. Appreciate the time, my friend. Tell us about some of those thousands of podcasts you're doing over at PFF so people know where to find you.
Yeah. All day, every day, it feels like, over on the PFF YouTube channel. You can see all the preview and review shows. We're previewing every single game. We're reviewing every single game. We've got a couple of specialized shows, a quarterback specialized show with Seth Galina, an In the Trenches show with Ollie Conley, a rookie review with John Ledyard that we do every single week. And those shows are a lot of fun. And then, of course, if the NFL draft is your main focus, the NFL Stock Exchange podcast with myself and Connor Rogers, for having a lot of fun doing that. And we're just about to dig into these early position rankings where we're starting to do a lot of the final film evals now that the regular season is done in college football. So that's coming a little bit later this month, and as we get up to All-Star weekend when we get to the end of January.
Trev, enjoy the holidays, enjoy the new year, and we'll catch up back with you once the season's over, my friend. Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
That's Draft Season, brought to you by Moody's. For Tony Pauline and Trevor Sikkema, I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.